Hey everybody, this is Rob Ryerson and Mike Papakota, the Bowtie Sales Guys. We are here to be your friends in the hard work of sales, to be your partners, your cheerleaders, your encouragement as you are trying to make sales. And bring this podcast to you every week to share with you some stories from our experiences as sales guys, to give you some tips and encouragement, and to hopefully kind of keep you going. Mike, how are you doing today?
Man, I am doing great, Rob. Got my first COVID shot today, which I'm excited about. And my Nespresso machine that I ordered showed up today. So I'll get to put that together later and get some espresso. So I'm excited.
Woo, it's a big day.
It's a very big day.
Yeah, I got my second COVID shot today. So where were you able to get yours?
I got it here in Fort Smith at Baptist Health. Made an appointment last week, and I will tell you, they are running a really tight ship over there. Guys in and out. I was in I think 30 minutes, maybe, just because they make you sit for 15, right?
Yeah.
So,
excellent.
very good job.
Yeah, I got mine at Sam's Club, which was just kind of hilarious because I'm like, I get my COVID shot, get some new tires, get a giant tub of cheese balls, all at once. It was, but no, great experience as well, and super happy to have that second shot. And I hopefully our listeners are getting their shots too, and doing well. Well, Mike, we want to encourage everybody who's listening to give us a little thumbs up if you're watching live on Facebook right now or watching on YouTube. Give us a little thumbs up. Ask us any questions or make any comments you might have. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Play or any of those places, we'd love to have your reviews, your feedback. And would love to have you interact with us as we try to bring you some real excellent content that is valuable for you as a salesperson.
Yeah, listen, we try to bring the best we can, and hopefully you can pull out one nugget, because that's the key, right? Something that you can listen. If you're going to listen, hopefully you're getting something out of it.
That's right. Well, today we are going to talk about follow-up. We're going to talk about how tremendously important it is to follow up. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about email and sending emails, where to get email addresses, what makes a good email campaign and a bad email campaign, some of those things. And so once you've sent that email off, that first email, what do you do then? And how do you follow up? And maybe just to kind of set the stage, I thought I'd kind of share some statistics. I know we like to say here on the podcast that facts tell, but stories sell. Here's some facts that are going to tell you about follow-up. So, and if you're in sales, you've probably heard some of these before, but they bear repeating. Mike, did you know that 2% of sales are made after just the first contact? 2%.
No, I think, maybe like you said, I heard that somewhere along the way, but it's not one that kind of sticks in there. But I can relate.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't made many one call closes.
That's right. 2% after the first contact, 3% after the second contact, 5% of sales happen after the third contact, 10% of sales happen after the fourth contact, and are you ready for this? 80% of sales get made after the 5th to 12th contact.
Man. That's a crazy stat, no doubt.
The vast majority, basically what this tells us is, if you are in sales, you cannot be one and done with reaching out to customers. You can't,
no doubt.
You can't just say, oh, well, I sent them an email and they didn't reply, or, I popped in and, they said they weren't interested or they were too busy. No, one contact is not enough, because 80% of sales happen after the 5th contact. Now, here's the flip side of that coin that is absolutely terrifying for salespeople. 44% of salespeople give up after just one attempt. 44% of salespeople give up after just one attempt. And only 8% of salespeople follow up more than 5 times.
Yeah.
Only 8%. You know what that means? Is that 8% of salespeople are getting 80% of the sales, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they're following up past number 5 or 6, I mean, they're still in the game, right? They haven't been taken out of the game. So, yeah,
absolutely. It is, follow up is absolutely critical to being effective as a salesperson. If you're going to make sales, you've got to follow up. And following up means that you don't give up until you actually get an answer, right? Like, it's so easy to make assumptions, to kind of decide for the client or the customer that they've made a decision, but they haven't actually given you an answer, and you give up too soon. So our big idea today is don't give up before you get an answer. I mean, it can be frustrating when people go silent. It can be, disheartening. Like, we have all been in that place where it is just like, I wish I could get some kind of answer. But before you cut bait, you've got to make sure that you're actually going to get an answer, but, before you say goodbye. So, I thought what we do is maybe give some ideas on, like, here's some things to keep in mind when it comes to follow up and staying after getting that answer from a client, from a customer. The first thing is this: is don't be afraid to follow up. Yeah, don't be afraid to follow up.
That's absolutely key. I mean, I think if you're afraid to follow up, it may just because you're not confident in the messaging that you're sending. Because I think, when it comes to following up, crafting the right message is key, because you don't want to be seen as a pest. I think that's always been my biggest fear in my follow-up is I don't want to be a pest, but I want to continue the conversation or provide you with more information, because obviously I haven't given you enough reason or enough value to move forward. And so I think as you're doing that follow-up, it's important to craft the message to where it's not just the same, hey, what do you think? What do you think? You ready to move forward yet? At that point, it's like, no, don't ever contact me again. I don't want to move forward. But finding ways to continue the conversation is really what you're doing with your follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the reality is that so many customers have to confer with somebody else before they can make a buying decision. There are some businesses where, like, one individual can make the decision and it's just a done deal. But people have to check their budgets. They have to talk to their spouse. They have to, deal with other pressing concerns from their customers. Like, they need time to think. Sometimes it takes time, and that's just a reality. So maybe one of the things you can do as a salesperson is build that need for time into your discussion with them and ask for specific dates about when the decision making is going to happen. So for instance, maybe you're selling automobiles and somebody's on the lot looking, and they say, "Listen, I'm interested, but I got to talk to my wife," which is a totally legitimate thing. Now, I mean, that might be just an excuse to get rid of you, but I mean, it's a totally legitimate thing. You might say, well, listen, is that something you're going to do tonight? Or is it, you think you're going to talk to her tomorrow? When would be best for me to follow up with you after you talk to her? You get some sense of when that's going to be. And then on that date or immediately after that date, you make the big ask. You call and you say, hey, yesterday was the day that you're going to meet with your spouse. You're going to talk with your spouse, or you're going to meet with your management team. Are we ready to move forward? You want me to start the paperwork? You make that ask based on getting some sense of when you need to follow up from the customer or from the client.
Yeah, and the reality is, listen, they may have given you that date, like you said, to just get you off their back, and I'm the worst at that. I do. I'm like, give me till Monday, and then they call Monday, and I don't answer. And it's not because I'm not interested, but I needed to get them off the phone at the time because I wanted some more time to think about it, which I think leads into, like you said, okay, so you tried once, that was twice. There's still like 3 or 4 more attempts to go before most of the sales happen. So don't give up just because they don't call you back or they don't respond to you in that second follow-up. Because I forget what the number was. You said, when sales are made, but it was pretty low after the second attempt.
Yeah, absolutely. It's only 3% happen after the second attempt. Yeah. So you've got to stay with it. And listen, good clients might be too strong. At least they don't mind persistent salespeople. Right. I'm the kind of person that if I don't have to think about something, if somebody else is managing the deadline or somebody else has, taken the ball and the ownership of something, I love that because then I don't have to worry about it. And a good salesperson can be that, outsourcing of the decision making, or at least the project management on behalf of the client or the customer. I think that's something that maybe salespeople don't see themselves enough as project managers in the early stages of a project.
I think you're the project manager all the way through, Rob. That's a really great analogy because you're managing a lot of different pieces. Obviously, it's your piece and their piece and deadlines and dates. They've got a lot of other things going on. This isn't their main focus. And for you to take on that as a project and say, here's the dates that we're shooting for and making sure that those dates get hit, that does take a lot off of the prospect's plate. And it also helps for you to build up your credibility as a professional that, hey, I do deliver on what I say I'm going to do.
Yeah. And maybe, and I'm just kind of spitballing here and thinking off the top of my head, maybe that's a way to even frame yourself as depending on, and again, it depends on what your product or your service is that you're selling, but maybe even framing yourself as, hey, I might be a salesperson, but I like to think of myself as a project manager, and I'm here to serve you, to make sure this thing gets done, to be somebody you can depend on and rely on. And here's how we're going to do it. Here's what the process is, what the timeline looks like. And including in that, here's where decisions need to be made and how I'm going to be following up.
Yeah, I like that idea because, there's a lot of people out there that call themselves consultants these days. That's kind of the buzzword. No one's really a salesperson anymore. They're a consultant. But I like the approach of, hey, and not only am I going to help you with this, but I'm going to be the project manager. I'm going to take the lead on this. And that does set you apart from what everybody else is doing and calling themselves for sure.
Yeah. Man, we're coming up with good ideas here, Mike. It's almost like we should have a podcast to talk about how to be good salespeople. All right. Another key thing when it comes to follow-up, and that is to listen when you're having conversations with your clients, your customers, your prospects, to listen for buying questions. You can get a really good sense of where somebody's at, what they're thinking, based on what they're asking you. And that's going to determine the type of follow-up you do and the type of things that are needed in the follow-up. So if they're asking questions about how stuff works, like what the details are, then your follow-up becomes providing that kind of information to them. If their questions are about, what start date is or what deadlines look like, then your follow-up is determined by that. What do we need to do next? When they're beginning to ask those kinds of questions that indicate, hey, I'm actually kind of interested in this, you want to follow up based on what they're asking, because that's the thing. This goes back to something we talked about, I think, in our first episode, connecting the dots for the customer. They're asking these kinds of questions. You need to be providing these kinds of answers and following up with those kinds of things, demonstrating your credibility, demonstrating that you're there to serve them and to help them and help get them across the finish line.
Yeah, no doubt. Especially when they start talking about billing, and invoicing and okay, how are we going to pay for this? To me, they've already bought it. Now they're just trying to figure out when they have to pay for it. And that's certainly one of those big ones you always want to be listening for sure.
Yeah. And a key there is when they shift in the way they talk from talking about something being yours to something being ours. Like
Right.
that's a key. Like you can tell when they begin to claim some ownership of this thing, whether it's an idea. And I mean, we've both worked in, advertising and in marketing, and where you're kind of selling ideas that bring the brand involved, to be involved in that. And you can see when the idea goes from being, your idea to being our idea, that you are on the right track at that point.
Yeah, I watched a documentary the other day on it was on baseball pitchers and scouting and in the fastball, and they were talking about how when there's a fastball and it's thrown right, there's an electricity. You can't see it, but you can feel it. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel the same way when you're listening for those, those verbal buying signals. There's also a shift in the energy in the room. I mean, you can just sense it. You can sense that, okay, this thing is now beginning to build momentum and it's propelling forward, and you can feel that energy. And it's really time, like you said, to start now connecting the dots, bringing you down to that question, that are we ready to move forward?
And the worst thing you can do as a salesperson is to feel that electricity, to pick up on those things, and then not follow up.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it, though. We've both seen it, yes. Especially from a sales leadership perspective. When I was managing teams, it's like you had them. You had them. You were right there. And not quite sure why you gave up. Did you get scared? Were you not prepared? A lot of times it is. I think they're not prepared for those buying signals to come because they went in with the mindset, this person's never going to buy. And then all of a sudden they're ready to buy it. Now they don't know what to do. Don't know how to follow up and move it forward.
Yep, absolutely. So another thing is to recognize when a no isn't really a no. Sometimes customers say no because they don't have all the information that they need to make a decision. Sometimes they say no because they're too busy to say yes. And you've, walked in when they're dealing with a customer, when they've got something else going on. They just have too much on their plate right now to say yes, so they're going to say no. Sometimes customers say no because they aren't convinced yet of the value of whatever it is that you're selling. Sometimes they say no because they don't think to say, not at this time, but I might be interested in a few months. They just say no for now. A no might not be forever. It might just be a no for now. Sometimes customers say no because they're too scared to say yes. So I think it's important when it comes to following up is to not take a no at face value. How can a customer, how can a salesperson kind of ask for some feedback? How can they get some sense of when a no isn't really a no?
Well, I mean, listen, I recently made a purchase for a product that I really wanted, but I wasn't happy with the price. I felt like, all right, I can probably get this price down. You know what I mean? And we went back and forth. And to the credit to the salesman, he did not discount his price. He felt like the value was there. And I ended it with, well, I guess we've just reached an impasse and we're not going to be able to do business. But he must have sensed that I really was excited about the product because he didn't stop following up. He gave me a couple days and he came back and he said, Mike, I know we've discussed the price, but he's like, I really think this is a great product for you. And eventually, you know what, Rob? I ended up buying. I bought it at the price. He held the line and I bought it because it was something that I wanted. But I think he was able to sense that it wasn't a hard no. And maybe it was because I didn't say no. I said, well, I think we've reached an impasse. And so to him, that wasn't a no. Like to some, that would have been a no. That I'm like, well, we're going to move on now. So I think a lot of it is in the wording, in the tone, in the inflection in the voice from the customer of how did they say that no? Was it a firm no, like, no, don't ever call me again, I'm not doing business with you? Or was it more of, I don't think so. Probably not for me. I think those types of that type of language leaves the door open for follow-up and for figuring out, like you said, I just wasn't convinced of the value right at that moment. But he came back, we discussed again. He went over what they were going to deliver, what my ROI was going to be, and I eventually ended up pulling the trigger and going with the service, which I did end up canceling a month later because none of what he told me was true. But but he got me to the finish line for at least a month.
Yes. Yeah. And I've told this. I told the story, I think, on our first episode about the solar panels that Vanessa and I wanted to buy for our house, and we were ready to buy. And not only did the salesperson that we have not connect the dots that we were putting out there, saying, hey, this is what's motivating us, this is what we want, and he was talking about stuff way over here. He also didn't do any follow-up. And so I ended up reaching out to another solar company because we wanted to buy solar panels. And he asked all the right questions and sent me a text after our first conversation, had a proposal to me that day, and in fact, created some sense of urgency, because this was actually on March 31st. And so I don't know if he was making it up or not, but he said that, hey, it's the end of the quarter. Our financing company wants to get, some more stuff on the books, and, provided us with some kind of discounts, manufactured some urgency. And you know what we did? In 1 day's time, between when I made the initial call to that company to conversation, several follow-up texts from him, another meeting that included my wife, we bought solar panels that day, that very day. And
yeah, I mean, he was on it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he did all of the right things, and it wasn't one call. It happened quick, but it was a series of follow-ups and communication. So kudos to that salesperson.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the other thing you need to do is to recognize when an excuse actually is a no. Like, the last thing you want to do is you've got to follow up, but you cannot be a nudge who makes yourself such a stench in somebody's nostrils that, they never want to do business with you or anybody else ever again. So you got to recognize that when someone uses an excuse as a no, because that happens sometimes, because people don't like to say no. They don't, that's a no is a confrontational thing to say. And so people say other things instead. They make excuses. Mike, how can you recognize when an excuse is actually a no and when it's not like a real reason?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to take some more follow-up to find out if that excuse was a no. And typically what I find, and I think you've probably found this as well, once they give you that excuse and you make some calls, you do some emails, maybe some text messages, and they just stop responding, typically that you can figure out pretty quick that excuse was actually a no. And maybe you just put them into a tickler file and you follow up with them 6 months down the road, a year down the road. But I think once they go silent, to me, that's a pretty good a reason to say, yeah, that was a no, not just an excuse.
Yeah. The tremendously important thing to keep in mind for everybody is you have got to follow up. You've got to follow up. The job is not a one and done kind of thing. The vast majority of sales take place after you have had multiple conversations, multiple contacts with your customers and your clients. So don't give up before you get an answer. If you do, you are leaving sales on the table. And it's such a pity. It is something that, it's just heartbreaking to see. And
just ask the last guy that tried to sell you some solar panels.
He left the
He's
sale.
not listening to the podcast.
Yeah, I hope he is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he left a sale on the table. One, because he didn't connect the dots that we were, that we needed, and two, he never followed up, and so we went with somebody else. So this leads me to our tip for the day. One of the things we try to do each week when we talk with you is give you something actionable that you can put into practice today. And Mike, I thought, since we're talking about following up and recognizing, when a no is a no and when it's not really a no and how to follow up with people, I thought maybe we could talk about the breakup email. The breakup email, and I got a little question mark about this because I'm not sure I know how I feel about the breakup email. Now, the breakup email is kind of a last resort email that gets sent to someone saying, hey, I've reached out to you a number of times, haven't heard back, I'm breaking up with you. And it's essentially that kind of trying to bait a response out of a customer or a client. And there are a lot of folks out there, if you Google, follow up, you're going to find, as a salesperson, you're going to find HubSpot articles and the Marketing Donut articles and all sorts of stuff that talk about using the breakup email. What do you think, Mike? Are you in on the breakup email or are you out?
I'm out. I don't like to close the door, Rob. We may not be able to do business right now, and that's fine. It happens. But a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, there may be an opportunity for us to do business. I have seen it time and time again, especially in the media business where, hey, we don't have budget for you. We don't have budget for you, but you stay in contact. You just, you keep following up like we've talked about, but you don't ever just close the door. To me, that's just a bad way to do business. Now, have we ever had to fire clients because they were just, didn't want to do business with them? Sure. But on prospects, I say keep the door open. I'm not a big fan of the breakup email.
Yeah, I'm not either. We talked last week about subject lines that are like too cute, too clever, too cheesy. And the breakup email feels to me like that. So, I think our tip for folks today would be like, when it comes to cutting off a prospect and, using something like the breakup email, man, do it. If you do it very judiciously. And if you feel like we do that, I'm not super comfortable with this. It doesn't feel like my personality. And B, I think there could be something down the road. Then don't listen to what all the sales blogs say. Don't use the breakup email. Keep doing follow-up and shift it from maybe once every couple of weeks to once every couple of months. And just stay in front of somebody. And who knows? You might turn a prospect into a client on down the road. But if you break up with them, you might not.
Yeah, that's the thing. Once you break up with them, they're like, well, that guy didn't want to do business with me because I wasn't ready right now. Why would I call him today? I think if you could just continue with that follow-up, like you said, continue to provide value in your follow-up emails, even if it's just providing, industry information, or if you've got another deal that's come along that might be of interest to them. Hey, this is an opportunity that's come up. I just wanted you to take a look at that. I think you should always keep the lines of communication open, and it's kind of short-sighted, in my opinion, to send that breakup email, because once you send the breakup email, that's it. It's over. Because if you want to call back and try to communicate with them again, it's like, oh, I got to start this relationship all over because I already broke up with you once.
Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, folks, thanks so much for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're on Facebook Live, give us a thumbs up. You can find our Facebook page at Bowtie Sales Guys on Facebook. Love to see you over there. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Play, any of those places where podcasts are found, please give us a like, give us a review, and tell you got that buddy, you got that friend there in the office, that one person who seems to get you and understand you. We've all been there. We've all got that person. Tell them about this podcast and have them listening too, and that way the two of you can crush it while everybody else is not, right? But until we talk again next week, Mike, do you have any final words of encouragement to keep everybody following up?
Like you said in the beginning, Rob, don't give up till you get an answer.
Excellent. We'll see you next week.